Good afternoon. Welcome to our next session of the day, Computing the Future, Setting New Directions. My name is Cynthia Barnhart, and I am MIT's Chancellor and the Ford Foundation Professor of Engineering. Being a chancellor can entail different things at different schools. Here at MIT, it's about all things students. So it is through this lens, that of students, that I view the future and the directions we take at MIT, and why I and so many others at MIT are so excited about the Stephen A. Schwarzman College of Computing, a catalyst for inventing the future and envisioning and evolving MIT's brand of research and education. Our students will benefit in many ways. For one, there will be increased opportunities to create and engage in multidisciplinary education and research, and to learn through new integrated curricula, and to pursue flexible pathways and degree programs. No doubt, our students will reimagine and reinvent their experiences at MIT and beyond in ways we can't fully fathom right now. And that opportunity for invention is just one reason we see game-changing possibilities for the new college. And speaking of game-changing, we are grateful and thrilled to be hosting and hearing from David Siegel, Diane Greene, Drew Houston, and John E. Kelly in this session. They are each luminaries in their fields and also, thankfully, steadfast supporters of MIT's mission. They will offer us their own unique experiences, perspectives, and insights on our session's theme, while serving as powerful examples to our students about the kind of positive impact they too can have on the world one day. So without further delay, it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage David Siegel, co-chairman of 2 Sigma Investments and founding advisor of MIT's Quest for Intelligence.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. As we think together about the future of computing, though I'm extremely optimistic that the best is yet to come, my talk today will focus on being realistic. I apologize, but unlike what has become common in the tech industry today, there will be no hype in what I'm about to say. Maybe a little bit of hype. As many of you know, I've spent my life, pretty much my entire life, working with algorithms, and I've focused on the field of artificial intelligence. The research and progress in these areas in my lifetime has been astounding. We've moved, very importantly, from a world where computers assist people to one where computers are routinely making decisions for people. And this is a big difference. This is a massive shift. And in my mind, of course, this will make the world a better place. But, and I want to be realistic, we are not just here. There is a fear that we could move in a direction that is far from an algorithmic utopia. We need to build a world that benefits from and understands how these technologies work, and most importantly, where our new technologies fall short. I see a lot of misinformation out there, and I worry that it's distracting people from the real technological problems that we face, and importantly, the research that we must do. I see parallels between the world today and of that remarkably entertaining movie, Dr. Strangelove. If you've never seen it, you should go watch it later. And no, I'm not Peter Sellers. I'm glad that you guys got the joke. It parodies the bizarre thinking of the Cold War era. The plot centers around the dangers of an unstoppable algorithmic doomsday machine. The threat of nuclear war back then was real, but paranoia about the Red Menace was borderline hysterical. Some of the hype around our increasingly algorithmic AI-driven world and the dangers that might exist remind me of this paranoia. I've learned to love algorithms over the years, but my experiences with them have been very good, but not always perfect. Important basic research is still needed to take our algorithmic world to the next level, safely and sanely. As algorithms are called upon to increasingly make decisions, we must all pause and reflect on their current strengths and weaknesses. In this talk, I'd like to highlight 4 fundamental research areas that I feel need substantial progress over the coming years to avoid a Strangelove-like future. They are managing complexity and reliability, security, data integrity and bias, and algorithmic explainability. I believe the way professors and students at this new college approach these research areas and others will have huge implications for the world we live in tomorrow. Years ago, algorithms were pretty simple. It was easy to look at 10 lines of Fortran code, as I did as a kid, and understand what they were doing. Today, we rely on algorithms that run on complicated computer systems. They could have 10 million or 50 million or more lines of code. Managing the complexity of these systems has become a real engineering challenge. It's one thing if they are performing something simple and harmless, but it's a different situation when they perform more crucial tasks, like driving your car. Managing their ever-increasing complexity while maintaining reliability requires fundamental advances in software engineering. Microsoft is full of top engineers. It's a terrific company. Still, they famously have trouble rolling out updates to Windows. Let's face it, Windows is not that complicated compared to some of the big systems we're developing today. We are building software that exceeds the complexity of anything humans have ever built before. I mean, that's a remarkable thought. We have to continue to learn how to manage this increasing complexity better. Related to this challenge is security. As our dependence on decision-making algorithms grow, we need to make sure our systems are more secure than ever. People didn't pay much attention to security when the internet was first invented, and we all know that we're continuing to pay the price for that today. Despite some important advances, the problem will become more acute as decision-making algorithms proliferate. In any society, you have bad actors. We have to assume that people will try even harder to exploit security flaws of increasingly critical software. So let's learn from our experience with the internet and make security a top priority. Data integrity issues are the third area which I think basic research has to be prioritized. This is in the news quite a bit, since data is such an integral part of machine learning algorithms. But substantial unsolved problems in data privacy, data ownership, and data bias remain. Without solutions, the algorithms that drive our world are at high risk of becoming data compromised. Concerns about data use can hinder the development of algorithms and their benefits. For example, if there really was a way to guarantee privacy and protection of any kind of data, let's take healthcare data, people would be more willing to contribute their valuable information to medical research projects. Consider this. A few years ago, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services began to withhold some patient records from research data sets. They contained information on substance misuse. The centers cited privacy concerns and took the data out. But substance misuse is associated with more than 60,000 deaths a year in America. So that omission was a big loss for researchers and, by extension, patients. We are missing the opportunity to solve pressing problems because of the lack of accessible data. Moving to my next concern, and this is related, are questions of data bias, which are becoming more and more important. Frankly, most data sets have some kind of bias. Any machine learning algorithm built from such data, you guessed it, is probably biased. But I would point out that there is some confusion between data bias and ethics, which is ethics in AI is a very hot topic. When people talk about ethics in the context of AI, sometimes I think what they really mean is data bias. Not to digress too deeply into the topic of ethics in AI, That would take up the rest of the afternoon, and in fact, part of the afternoon is dedicated to a discussion on this area. I'd just like to remind people that, in my view, and maybe this is a little controversial, AI is really just a tool. Algorithms are tools. Tools can be used for good things or bad things. Perhaps it gets a bit trickier when your tool is making important decisions automatically for you, and then it may be reasonable to ask, is this an ethical application? But I think the argument ultimately applies more to deciding if the tool is being used appropriately than is the tool appropriate. There's another problem too, which is debating ethics is a societal discussion that is as old as humanity itself. Last I checked, there is no right answer to most ethical questions. And to me, that means there is no universal way to create ethical AI. Maybe this is controversial, not sure, but discussions about ethics should really, in my view, primarily be about how the algorithms are used, not about the algorithms themselves. But let's get back to data bias. Data is the material that makes up AI tools, and biased data makes bad tools. It's like having a hammer that's unevenly balanced, making it likely to hurt someone or break something. You don't want a biased hammer. So research is needed to ensure that the integrity of data sets that much machine learning and other AI research is being done with does not have biases that are impacting their effective use. I'd finally like to talk about explainability or interpretability, which remains a central problem in machine learning. Why did a model do that? Machine learning algorithms can't provide an explanation for their outputs, or at least they can't provide an explanation in the way that we normally would mean explanation, an explanation that humans can understand. The parameters an algorithm relies on are numerous and complex. There's no way usually to intuitively explain their thought process. This is obviously a problem not just for researchers. It makes it hard for you to improve your algorithms, but it's also for society a big issue as we increasingly rely on these algorithms. I believe we have to be able to understand the world we're interacting with to be comfortable with living in it. People will only tolerate AI's lack of ability to explain its decisions up to a point. We don't complain or ask too many questions when decisions are in our favor. Like when a loan application is approved, you're not going to debate the loan officer, why did you approve it? Imagine, though, if someone is denied a heart transplant and the AI that made that decision is asked, why? It can't just say, well, I solved millions of equations, and they concluded, no heart for you, sorry. When an opaque algorithmic decision works against us, we want to know why. And if the answers aren't clear because of the interpretability problem, we won't stand for it. And I think that's totally fair. Related to this is the issue that you can't yet reason with an algorithm. People reason with each other all the time. That is, in fact, related to our unique ability we have one-shot learning, the ability to learn from an example of one. Presented with a single compelling example, we can change our minds. This is a critical part of human reasoning, but not yet something that we've perfected in any kind of AI or machine learning scenario. Okay, let's take stock on my talk. I've shared some important research problems that need to be addressed to manage our transition to an increasingly algorithmic decision-making world. In an earlier era of computing, we typically were writing software to solve problems that clearly had a right answer. Years ago, one of the first programs I wrote used the Newton-Raphson method to compute the square root of a number. How many people here have done that exercise? A lot. It was a fun project, and like most coding until more recently, you could tell if your program worked because there was a right answer that everyone agreed upon. Today, we are increasingly asking computers to do things where there isn't necessarily a right answer, or at least an answer that everyone agrees with. I encourage the research community to focus on the critical points that I've mentioned today. Data bias can make algorithms subtly subjective. Ethics vary by individual and culture, complicating matters further. Complexity can introduce critical bugs that are hard to find with traditional testing approaches. The lack of explainability will reduce our confidence that answers being produced are believable or even correct. One big advantage in a human-driven world that we've had over the years is that it's proven to be very robust. One reason it's so robust is each of us goes about our decision-making differently. Imagine if critical decisions are made increasingly by a single or small number of implementations of an algorithm. That robustness could be lost. This is particularly challenging when the decisions being made don't have an obviously correct answer. It's probably okay for the world to rely on one provably correct square root subroutine, but maybe not for complex and critical problems. We have to be careful not to turn over decisions to algorithms and AI that are beyond their current abilities. Dr. Strangelove learned that lesson the hard way. Thank you very much.
That was great. Yeah. Hi there. I'm Diane Greene. I'm so honored and pleased to be here with you today celebrating the Schwarzman College of Computing. I believe compute, and I think everybody here does, is going to be key to future research breakthroughs across science and engineering. And the Schwarzman College of Computing positions MIT at the forefront and readying it to contribute and lead. You know, it's core to MIT's success that it provides faculty and students the labs and the lab equipment to make their breakthrough discoveries, things like the new nanobuilding or scanning electron microscopes. But now we have a new tool that's just completely general purpose and pretty much every lab's going to use, which is compute and advanced AI. And they also need data, and if you will, data's kind of like what the great libraries full of books used to be. So we need these three things for our researchers. They need access to data, they need self-learning AI, and they need a lot of compute to do their groundbreaking research. Today, the public clouds are the leading and largest amount of compute capabilities. Industry also has access to most of the data. Compute is super expensive, although we keep it down, and that issue needs addressing. And I believe we can do this by evolving our models for how industry, academia, and government all collaborate, and we need to solve the funding issues. You know, computers, they've been important to research since the first ENIAC, but we're now at this turning point in their criticality because instead of being constrained by a human's ability to code up an algorithm, we now do algorithm development by combining data with the algorithm and having it learn and find patterns faster and across more data than any human is capable of. And it can actually surpass what a human can do for finding these patterns. Of course, with this AI, and particularly with the compute-intensive technologies such as neural net deep learning, the rule is the more compute and the more data, the better the accuracy of the results. Just to give you an illustration of the power of AI in science, an experiment was run by the late physicist Zhang and his research group, where they used machine learning to rediscover the periodic table. And they were able to do it in just a few hours. And this, perhaps chemistry's one of its greatest achievements, originally took scientists years of trial and error to achieve. And I think it shows that AI will undoubtedly be instrumental in future Nobel Prize-worthy discoveries. This is a pretty different situation from the 60s and 70s when DARPA funded the ARPANET to connect the universities, and researchers created the internet, and then it went into the civilian sector. The large internet companies invented a disruptive and highly profitable model that has let them transcend the need for government-funded research. And they've been able to fund their own compute, data management, and AI. And as a result, the large internet companies have the most advanced compute technologies. So industry is now ahead of the academic institutions in compute capabilities, in access to some of the biggest data sets, and also in the ability to assemble large numbers of the world's leading AI researchers. But this is problematic because it's not industry's mission to do basic research or to collaborate with outsiders, although they often do. A friend, a Cornell PhD student, Maithra Raghu, recently ran a few queries for me on the origin of papers in the top 2 over the last 3 years in the top 2 AI conferences, ranking them by the number of citations. And it showed that up to 60% of the top 5% of the papers ranked by citation came out of industry, whereas overall, all the papers, 25% came from industry. Alphabet's AI research lab, DeepMine, recently won a protein folding contest. And a computational biologist said DeepMine's success just kind of came out of the blue. He said their work was just tremendously impressive, but he said it should be noted that they did have the best ML machine learning tools, and the deepest pockets for compute. So industry's cloud data centers are super big. Single buildings could have a whole football stadium inside of them. They're hospital clean, have rows and rows of compute racks, and what you see increasingly is huge numbers of specialized AI compute clusters. They need this because the speed and the real estate efficiency of computer chips are not still doubling every year, as Moore's law said. And so the speed improvements now are coming from workload-specialized custom chips and architectures. This underscores the validity of a new axiom, no chip, no AI. China understands this. They've invested I read recently, $65 billion over the last 2 years to jumpstart their semiconductor industry capabilities. The cloud companies are spending billions of CapEx dollars every year to expand their compute, storage, and network capabilities. And the researchers that work in these companies have more access to compute and to certain proprietary data sets than anyone else. They're also able to pay a multiple of university salaries. 2 weeks ago, I was in Germany, and a professor told me that her university's top AI graduates and scientists were constantly being recruited away, either to America or China. Last week, I was told by 2 different people independently that a Chinese university near Hong Kong was given $800 million just to recruit AI talent. So and another interesting thing is as the rest of the world starts to adopt AI, it's even possible that we're not going to be able to keep up with the demand. If you look at the internet companies or the OpenAI, a nonprofit AI think tank that's working on artificial general intelligence, they recently issued a report that showed that the large AI training runs over the last few years have been growing exponentially, doubling every 3.5 months since 2012. That's pretty fast growth. In a sense, capitalism is doing its job, and perhaps we just leave well enough alone. The industry AI labs are open sourcing their work, they're publishing their research, and in general, they really are working to make the world a better place. But that won't solve for the sort of long-term research that leads to the giant breakthroughs. Where will that continue to come from? And that's why we're here today, because we believe that's precisely where MIT and the Schwarzman College of Computing will play an important part. As an aside, EECS long-term research is starting to be disadvantaged, in particular because the cloud companies run these mega operations across more and more specialized workloads, and they get unique knowledge. For example, they know how many of each type of machine instruction gets executed for the different workloads, and they can experiment with new configurations in every new data center. I'll just quickly mention that access to large amounts of data also brings challenges. First, it needs to be cleaned in order to be useful. This is super labor intensive for graduate students. Industries using large amounts of compute to develop and run automated techniques. The data is also siloed and difficult to join with other data sets, particularly if they're spread across different clouds, since they don't seamlessly work together. Then, valid privacy concerns are driving regulators to legislate the use of data in sometimes counterproductive ways, like those bits can't cross my geopolitical boundary. This advantages the countries with the biggest populations and the fewest regulations. A recent article in Nature Medicine described a China-based study that showed that deep learning could be used to diagnose common childhood diseases with high accuracy, with the high end of what the doctors could do. This was a collaboration of American and Chinese researchers. They had a 600,000 patient data set. It's from Guangzhou, China. It'd be difficult to get that much data and use it similarly in the United States due to our regulations about patient data. And then industry is understandably careful about sharing data that could violate users' rights. We can't yet credibly guarantee the privacy of users' data. So it's good that the Schwarzman College of Computing will take a seat in policy discussions, do scholarly work there, and help shape regulations. As an aside, I was here this morning and listening to the ethics discussions. I just wanted to mention that technology is always pounced on by aggressive, opportunistic people. My first startup was a low bandwidth streaming video company, and guess who the first users were? It was all for pornography. And we had to decide, no, we don't want pornography using our technology, which we did. Didn't cost us much at the time. But then in VMware, the virtualization company, some of the first users were hackers using the sandboxing of the virtual machines to plan their hacking attacks. Looking at the data problem, in order to solve it, I had a really interesting discussion with a guy, Keith Wintrob. He's an MIT alum and Stanford professor. And he did a lot of work to simulate data, but then he could not replicate the same results between his simulated data and the real data. So then he went to incredible effort to collect his own data, in this case, streaming video. He still only had a tiny fraction of what YouTube, Netflix, and the others had, but he did it anyhow because in talking to the companies, they were open to sharing with him, but they didn't have all the data that his research needed. These are still early days. Data's growing incredibly quickly, and there's an enormous opportunity for the Schwarzman College of Computing to be part of the solution. To give a sense of how much more data will be coming, think about edge-to-cloud connected device estimates. AMD CEO and MIT alumna Dr. Lisa Su recently said at CES that 2 billion sensors are in use today, and it's estimated to grow to 35 billion by 2020. Anecdotally, she also said, just for fun, I just really love building chips. We're so excited about technology. We can help turn the impossible into the possible, which is, of course, a classic MIT phrase. So in summary, compute, data, and AI are now invaluable to researchers, research scientists, and engineers. The industry labs have been able to attract the largest collections of top AI experts, and provide them with the most compute and salaries. For companies and our economy to continue to benefit from the commercialization of breakthrough discoveries, we need to encourage more industry-MIT collaboration, and it's in the best interest to have government fund these efforts. It's common that students and professors will do an internship or take a sabbatical in industry, which is really valuable, but the focus doesn't tend to be on long-term research or radical new ideas for how to approach problems, and the IP stays at the company. If we could also have top industry researchers and engineers take sabbaticals and embed at MIT, then we'll benefit from industry's unique knowledge and assets, and when a breakthrough does occur, the industry researchers will be in a position to bring it back to their companies and accelerate the commercialization. Finally, we need to find a way for government to properly fund the immense compute needs that faculty and students have. I wonder, could the cloud vendors receive a tax break for donating compute to universities? Should the government and universities collaborate on a giant cloud? That would be super expensive. It's urgent that academic researchers and their students have access to generous amounts of compute on a par with industry. This means developing these mechanisms to fund compute and salaries to solve the IP and privacy issues that will let us bring industry collaborators and their resources to academics. It's needed to help the extraordinary minds at MIT continue doing long-term fundamental research with every advantage that's available. It turns out that compute and advanced AI are now critical to the research process, and thus they're integral, as we know, to the mission of MIT and the Schwarzman College of Computing. So thank you very much. I'm excited to see what the coming years bring to MIT.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I am always so happy to be back at MIT. It's always a highlight of my year, and what an amazing occasion to be here. So it really makes me really proud to see MIT continuing to lead from the front and making ambitious investments like the one in the college. All right, so we're going to talk about computing in 2030, and specifically something that I call the human-machine partnership. So humans have a pretty unique ability. So we have this superpower. Let me get the clicker going. Let's see. Well, we have this superpower where we are able to invent technology and tools that make our life easier, and we offload a lot of our work to machines. And so we've done that in we've offloaded a lot of literal heavy lifting to machines, culminating in things like the Industrial Revolution, and more recently we've started to offload a lot of our intellectual work to machines. So back in the 1600s, a computer was a person, not a thing. And then now, of course, that's changed, and computation is something that used to be done only by humans, and now it's almost entirely done by machines. And that's a really important trend that's going to continue. So we've created this virtuous cycle where we invent machines, we offload more work, we use some of our free time to invent even better machines, and a lot of good things happen. Our productivity goes up, our standard of living, or we raise our standard of living, and we're able to tackle bigger and bigger challenges as a society. And all of us here are beneficiaries of that compounding growth. And with every turn of the cycle, we also find new things to do with our time. And I'm not talking about things like being an Instagram influencer or a drone operator. Those are real jobs now. I mean just things like just the concept of knowledge work or the concept of going to an office from 9 to 5. That's a relatively recent phenomenon. In fact, the term knowledge work was only invented about 60 years ago. And even in my own lifetime as a millennial, we've seen a lot of profound change, from the birth of the PC to the rise of the modern internet to cloud and mobile in the last 10 or 15 years. Technology is continuously transforming our lives and the way we work, and our productivity is always accelerating. Except for the fact that kind of isn't. And this was kind of surprising to me because I'm like, oh, we have all this technology, but around 10 years ago, the rate of productivity growth, at least in the US, fell pretty dramatically below historical levels. And now I'm not a labor economist, and probably some of you in the room are labor economists, so I won't get like too ahead of myself here. But I want to talk about a couple of things that can't be helping. And I really started getting interested in this a few years ago because my company was doing super well, but I had this feeling that my life was kind of on autopilot. And that my work, or the experience of work, had turned into this grind, or this kind of treadmill, where you wake up, or I wake up, try to get a workout in, go to the office, meetings all day, come home, try to eat, clean out my inbox, pass out, repeat. Now, to be sure, these are first world problems. I'm very lucky to be in that situation in the first place, but at the same time, I'm like, is this it? Right? And it was frustrating because I definitely felt busy and I was working hard, but I didn't feel productive. And when I looked into it, it turned out I wasn't that productive. And maybe none of us are. And when you shine a light on where we spend our time at work, and McKinsey did this a few years ago, it turns out that we spend the majority of our time, actually over 60% of it, on certain tasks like finding information and email and coordinating people. I like to call these things work about work. And to be fair, not all 60% of that is waste, but it does mean that we only spend 40% of our time doing the jobs we were actually hired to do. And so I thought about that a little more, and I'm like, okay, what that's really saying is take Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and just light them on fire this week and every week of your working life times a huge chunk of the planet. Or in other words, if for those of you who are students and you got your whole life in front of you and you're about to begin a 40 or 50-year career, unless something changes, you have a decade, maybe 2 decades of email to look forward to. And that's not all. As you can see, all the different apps we're using now have taken our attention and they've shattered it into a million little pieces. This doesn't make a lot of sense. How many of you would say that you were hired for your mind, that your job involves using your brain at work? Okay. Now, how many of you feel that you actually have the time and space to actually think? That you're able to, you finish every day and you're like, man, I just crushed it. I was in a flow state. I was super focused. If you have any tips for the rest of us, but a lot fewer hands, right? And no one is immune to this. So if Einstein were alive today, what would his day be like? He'd spend his first couple hours like archiving LinkedIn invitations and Groupons. And then he'd get down to work, and like just as he's about to have some brilliant flash of insight, like his phone would buzz, and he'd be like, oh, Trump tweet or Slack notification. You know, but will we still understand relativity? You know, maybe there's like 10 other breakthroughs that would have happened by now if we weren't in this situation. Like, we'll never know. And it's not just inefficient, it's also making us really unhappy. So 2/3 of people report being disengaged at work. Half people report being consistently exhausted at work. And those numbers have only been going up over the last 20 years. And this is tragic because work can be such a fulfilling experience, and everybody deserves that. Okay, so something needs to change here, but what should we do about it? The first thing we need is a change in mindset. So if you think about the knowledge economy, it's basically one ginormous exchange of dollars for brain power. Right? And every company can tell you down to the penny where payroll goes, where the dollars go. But then when it comes to the other side, like, where's the brain power go? We are totally blind. We're not even measuring it, let alone spending it well. And this is insane, because every single project that we've talked about today and every single challenge that we have as a society depends on being able to harness our brain power. And it depends on being able to do knowledge work well. And we have a long way to go there. But we need to start treating our brain power like the precious fuel that it is. And it's the fuel for human progress. And so it's things like this that were reasons why we evolved our mission at Dropbox to put a dent in this problem. And we believe that knowledge work has gone totally off the rails, needs some fundamental reimagination. So we decided our mission is to design a more enlightened way of working. And we'll have more. We'll talk about Dropbox another time. But to borrow the words of a wise professor from a couple hours ago, my advice to you is download Dropbox. But anyway, so what should we do about this? So I think that there are a few tactical things. Like we need to create the conditions for people to be able to use their minds at work. So first, I remember visiting my dad at work when I was a kid. And he spent most of his career at a Draper Lab down the road. And I went into his office, and a lot of things are the same. So he had a desk, he had a PC, he had a phone. But a lot of things are different. He got 5 emails a day, not 500. And he had a door that could close. And he could turn his phone off. And you could kind of see how someone like that could actually use their mind at work. Now, I'm not saying that we should go back to 1995, but we definitely need a much calmer and more focused working environment. But that's not going to be enough. And then when you think about, well, how do we improve knowledge work, I think machines can help a lot. And I think following this recipe of offloading a lot of our busy work to machines is a good one to follow. And we can start. There's a lot of busy work here, but maybe if we could find a way to have machines do more of the heavy lifting, then we would be freed up, and maybe things would start going in the right direction. So how do we do that? Humans and machines have these complementary abilities. And computers have a kind of mechanical intelligence. So they're really good at following instructions, they're really good at following recipes, they don't make mistakes. So a lot of benefits, but they have a ton of limitations too. And as we've heard a little bit today, a 3-year-old human can run circles around our most powerful supercomputer when it comes to basic things like carrying on a conversation, or just knowing basic facts about the world. But that's starting to change. And that's a big part of why all of us are here today, is there's been this amazing renaissance in AI and machine learning in the last 10 years. And machines have been getting all these new skills, so they can see and they can hear and speak, and to some extent they can read and understand things, certainly to a much greater degree than in the past. And these are just a few of the headlines in the last month alone. And some of them seem a little ridiculous, and AI that spews fake news, AI that plays Starcraft. You know, what are we really looking at here? But under the hood, there's some pretty amazing stuff happening. And so you can just take the Starcraft example. So Starcraft, so many of you have probably heard about AI dominating humans in board games like chess and Go. But it turns out what's really exciting from an AI perspective is that these AIs are teaching themselves to play these games. They're not running some pre-programmed strategy from a human. And it also turns out that a game like Starcraft is actually a lot harder of a nut to crack than some of those games. And the reason is because some of these real-time strategy games, like a Starcraft, what makes those hard and what make real life hard have a lot in common. So there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of complexity, a lot of ambiguity, and things are happening in real time. So decisions and stuff is coming at you a lot faster than you can deal with it. I love Starcraft. I've been playing Starcraft since I was 14. I'm also CEO of a 2,500-person company. The parallels between those two things are actually pretty surprising. And I don't think this is going to happen in the next 10 minutes, but I think in the future we're going to look back on this, the AI being able to figure out how to coordinate and plan and juggle these things is a really big deal and can help save us a lot of time. But when you add all this up and kind of unpack what it means to actually do some of these things from an AI perspective, it means that computers are starting to get these new skills, right? They're able to synthesize and summarize the real text. They're able to like read articles and answer natural language questions about them. And they're able to start doing things like organizing and coordinating and planning. And these are things that occupy a lot of our time. So it's pretty exciting. And then when you look at a lot of the questions that we have at work or the things that we need to get done, machine learning can help a lot. And so you take a question like, all right, which of these projects might run behind schedule? Or which of these emails do I need to respond to? A data science would translate that and be, oh, that's a classification problem. And computers are really good at taking all this data, filtering out the noise, figuring out what's relevant, and making accurate predictions, and they're getting a lot better. Or somebody like, hey, organize my email into topics. So data scientists would be like, oh, that's a clustering problem. And importantly, AI doesn't need to be perfect to be really useful. Right? Just ask anyone who's used Google Translate or a ton of other examples. And more, what we have to look forward to, we're going to have our machine brains take a first pass at everything and cut through a lot of the clutter so that our human brains don't have to. And hopefully that one day that like super obnoxious like 15,000 unread everything badge will finally go away. But anyway, you can start to see how some of these skills might be applied to things like finding information and email and coordinating people. All this work about work that occupies the majority of our time will start being massively assisted by machines. And frankly, the work, when you think about the machines being able to organize and prioritize and plan, coordinate, we're going to see that these are increasingly machine tasks in disguise. In the same way that computation went from being a human thing to a machine thing, we're going to see a lot of other verbs move in that direction too. And it's going to be a gradient. So some will be fully automated and some will be more assisted. But one way or another, the machines are going to take a lot of the heavy lifting off our plate. And we're going to be freed up. And this is important because the world needs humans. Computers don't have feelings or dreams or soul or imagination. We've got a lot of unique abilities that computers won't be able to match anytime soon, no matter how much of an AI optimist you might be. And so what we should be asking for is the best of both worlds. It won't be long before we all have an AI co-pilot that's able to not only take the drudgery out of our work, but it will spend all of its cycles to make sure that all of our cycles are used as effectively as possible. And this is important. This complementarity and this feeling and augmentation is important because so much of the narrative in AI is kind of about this existential zero-sum battle against the robots. And first, they're going to take all our jobs, and second, they're going to wake up, and then they're going to kill all of us. And I think at least part of that narrative is correct, right? And we should not kid ourselves, like not about the robot apocalypse. But that things like automation are going to displace a lot of jobs, and they're going to create real problems. This is going to be one of our biggest challenges as a society. And fortunately, we got a lot of smart people already making progress in some of these areas. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited about the college. But there's, for example, I've really enjoyed spending time with Zainab Tan, who lives at Sloan. And she's shown that through her Good Jobs initiative that companies like Costco that invest in their employees and entry-level employees, pay them well, give them career paths, give them training, are actually more profitable and more competitive than companies that don't make those investments or treat their employees like cogs in a machine. So we're going to need a lot more of that kind of thinking. But what excites me most about the computing in 2030 is that we're on the eve of a new generation of our partnership with machines. One where we can combine the unique superpowers of the human brain and the silicon brain. And we'll be able to redesign knowledge work so that machines take a lot of the busy work and so that people can be freed up to do the people stuff. And we can spend our working days on the subset of our work that's really fulfilling and meaningful. And as we do that, we'll be so much better equipped to tackle all the many challenges we face. And my hope is that in 2030, we'll look back on now as the beginning of a revolution that freed our minds, the way the Industrial Revolution freed our hands. And my last hope is that it happens right here, that the new College of Computing is a place where that revolution is born. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm John Kelly, IBM Executive Vice President. But more importantly, this afternoon, I am a technologist who has spent nearly 4 decades in technology and information technology. I'm also a person who works in the most advanced labs in IBM and around the world in universities. So I get to understand the past as well as see the future. I want to congratulate Raphael and the entire MIT community for this new college. It couldn't be more important to the United States and the world than right now. And Steve and the Schwarzman family, I want to thank you, not only for the magnitude of the gift, but I argue the timing of the gift is what's really critical. Because we are not on some form of a continuum with just another technology rolling forward. We are at an inflection point. We are at the beginning of something which we're just barely beginning to understand. And we've talked a little bit about it this morning, but let me show you my perspective on this. And let me put it quickly in a historic perspective. The first era of computing was all about mechanical switches and doing arithmetic. And that underlying technology evolved into vacuum tubes, and eventually we ran out of power, and we ran out of humans to make those machines do what we wanted them to do. So we went to a new technology, transistors. We started to integrate circuits. We started to integrate at an exponential rate, which is Moore's law, and started to increase the density of memory and storage in these computers. And all of a sudden, we realized in the 50s that, hey, we can program those computers. We can put a program into that machine, the storage is big enough, the processing's fast enough, that we can teach the machine to act and do things that we do. The last 50 or 60 years of computing has been the programmable era of computing. Everything from the largest systems that IBM builds to the laptop or your phone are programmable systems. That computer cannot do a single thing that we haven't programmed it to do. We're now entering an entirely new era of computing. This is not just about, it's all of a sudden artificial intelligence or machine learning. We now are moving to technologies and machines that do not require programming. They learn on their own, which is the artificial intelligence. And the underlying technology is moving fast, as I'll show you. And we can't even begin to understand what's going to happen in this third era because I picked 2011 as the start, only because that's the IBM Watson artificial intelligence machine. But we're only 8 years into what will be a minimum of 50 or 60 years, and I will argue more than that. So the timing, Steve, of this gift at this point in time, at the beginning of a new era of computing, couldn't be better. It reminds me of the early days in IBM when we invented the first programming languages, the Fortrans of the world, and we went to the universities and said, we need a new curriculum around computer science. And they said, what's that? I said, we need to invent programming. What's that? Well, we need colleges and universities now to major in this area. Let me point out what's also different now in the underlying technology. Computing systems have been designed basically for that programmable era. We started in the 50s with very simple programming. We advanced those technologies with Moore's law. We began to do very heavy-duty multiprocessing, massive parallel processing. We threw everything we could at this roadmap of computing to eke out computing power in the programmable era. While we were doing that, we were working on artificial intelligence. But we were using the programmable systems to do artificial intelligence. The first in the IBM AI history, the first games of checkers, the first game of chess, Deep Blue, that beat Garry Kasparov, was on a traditional computer with a little bit of AI specialty in it. The system, the infamous Watson Jeopardy system, was fundamentally on a classical computer. We operated AI separately from programmable computing. That time has ended. We are now co-designing artificial intelligence in our systems simultaneously. And the best example I can give you of that new convergence and where computing is going now is the Summit system or the Sierra system. These are the two largest computers in the world that we built for the United States Department of Energy for science and for defense. Those systems not only perform the largest traditional modeling computation of 200 petaflops, which, by the way, I was told not everybody's an MIT computer scientist. That means that it does 200 billion calculations 1,000,000 times a second. 200 billion calculations 1,000,000 times a second. As impressive as that is a more powerful AI system than a compute system. In fact, it was only on the floor at Oak Ridge for about 30 days when a team from Oak Ridge and some people from Google helped proved that that machine set a world record in AI learning. And that's because there's equal to or more AI custom accelerators in that system than there are general purpose processors. So for the first time, the two worlds have come together, and every system that IBM designs going forward now will be optimized for artificial intelligence. It's a different world. Keep that system in mind, because I'll come back to it in a minute. The other thing I should tell you about that system is not only is it big, it's about 3 tennis courts in size. It's still smaller than a cloud, but more powerful than a cloud, both in terms of compute and AI. But that computer consumes 13 million watts of power, 13 megawatts of power. For reference, what's between your ears is about 20 watts. So with 13 million watts of power, we're still barely approaching what a human can do with 20 watts of power. So we're doing something wrong. We're doing something wrong. Realizing that we had to push the roadmap of AI and computing together, last fall we came up to MIT and Raphael and said, from an IBM standpoint, let's try to advance the research here. Let's try to advance the research. We formed a new partnership. We're putting in hundreds of millions of dollars. We're putting our best talent from IBM, co-located with the best faculty and students here at MIT, to try to advance the technologies beyond Summit and Sierra, all the way from the underlying physics of lower power artificial intelligence processors, through how do we secure these systems, through how do we share the responsibility for the systems that we're going to be creating. And as new as this new Watson AI lab is, I can tell you we are ecstatic with the success of this lab. And in our view, the synergy between this lab, Steve, and your college is going to be off the charts. We're just thrilled. And I thank all of the tremendous faculty who have gravitated to this. The research and the papers and ideas that are coming out of this are stunning. So, as I said, everything we've built in the last 60 or so years has ridden this Moore's Law curve. And I see, Raphael and I worked for years and decades on the technology behind this. I see Ray Stata has worked for decades in the industry as well. Many of my colleagues from the industry. Moore's Law basically was an observation that we double the number of transistors and the performance every 18 months or so, and that has served us well as we shrunk the devices. But fundamentally, that law is based on the fact if we keep shrinking, it will go faster. That is no longer happening. And the energy consumption budget of writing that law, as I told you, is 13 megawatts. So we're reaching the physical limits of shrinking in Moore's Law. At the same time, we can't get that much power and energy in and out of a box. It's becoming physically impossible. So, with that being the case, what's beyond Moore's Law? How do we decouple ourselves from this concept of, let's build denser transistors, which are either a 1 or a 0, and can we compute in a different way than just 1s and 0s? And can we compute in a way that the computer's capacity and capability scales beyond Moore's Law and faster? Well, we're fortunate, because in May of 1981, a group of scientists from IBM and MIT got together in May, held a conference on something called quantum mechanics, and started to discuss the theory of using quantum mechanics for compute, way ahead of its time. Richard Feynman is in that picture, by the way, in the back right. The guy taking the picture is an IBM fellow, Charlie Bennett. The fundamental principles for quantum computing came out of that conference. We and many others in the industry spent the next 2 to 3 decades trying to build a quantum computer. 10 or 15 years ago, we had quantum computers that looked like this. Basically, a research project. Basically, we had built, instead of transistors, quantum bits or qubits. We had built 2 of them. We had taken them down to almost absolute zero. We had gotten them for the quantum physicists in the room to entangle. And we believed we could compute for the first time ever using quantum theory at the bottom of that physics research project. Fast forward now, just a few years, and this was early last year. This is the world's largest, most publicly available quantum computer. It's 20 qubits. It has roughly the performance on certain problems as that enormous Summit Sierra system that I showed you. It's prototype, though, of a commercial system. A couple of months ago, we announced this. This is a commercial, fully viable quantum computer. Reliable. Today at 20 qubits, we've announced we have 50. At 50 qubits, again, you cross over what's possible with a traditional computer. So that's the new roadmap. The exciting thing is scaling a quantum computer in qubits, and I don't have time to get into it, is a new exponential. In fact, when we reach 100 qubits in that system, I can prove to you that it will do calculations that exceed the number of atoms on the planet if they were all transistors. So we are about to enter a whole new regime, a whole new regime. And it was thought up until very recently that there were only a few problems that those computers could do if anybody could ever build one. So we built one. And now we look at what are the kinds of problems we can do with that kind of machine. Well, in computing as we know it today, there's a set of easy problems, the programmable things, the math, the things that we all understand. There's a set of really hard problems that classical computers struggle with. As an example, if you want to model from first principles, how do I put 2 or 3 atoms together into a molecule and get the lowest energy state, which will be a stable molecule, that's a tough calculation for a classic computer. We have to make all kinds of approximations. That quantum computer can do many of those kinds of problems, can solve many of the hard problems classical computers can't solve, and in fact can do a whole class of things that classical computers will never, ever be able to do. So when you look at this, you say, wow. Things like factoring numbers, which is the basis of all encryption on the planet, are really hard for classic computers. These quantum systems do it in a snap. Things like simulating quantum physics itself, what better way to do it than on a quantum computer? Things like finding new materials, new drugs with large molecules, dozens of atoms, hundreds of atoms, not 2 or 3, can only be done on a quantum computer. And optimization routines, whether it's sorting data or modeling the financial systems of the planet, can only be done at this scale with these kinds of systems. And most excitingly, we have demonstrated many artificial intelligence algorithms will run on this system. So now we're in a world where we've brought AI and compute together with Summit and Sierra. We're progressing those technologies to take down power and performance, and we're introducing quantum computing into the world. So I hope now you believe that this is not like a small increment or a typical point in time. We are on the verge of some incredible things. And I will end with what many of the other speakers said. I can prove to you, either in my labs or what we're doing in our labs and with MIT, everything I told you is going to happen in the computers. The issues will be all around the human factors. We take for granted when we communicate human to human, a human to machine. We must know that that machine is fair. We must be able to explain what it's doing. It must be secure. It must have ethics. And I will argue that in the past, when I built big computers, I at first could just build them, ship them. If it had a reliability problem, we'll go fix it. We learned over time we had to build quality and reliability into those systems from day one of development. If I had time, I could prove to you we must design in these attributes to these big systems and not think that we can do it later or paper it on top. We can build systems that increase the transparency and ethical behaviors into the guts of these systems. And I think this, Steve, I was thrilled that you included this whole domain of ethics and fairness and policy into this new school. I would argue that physics is fun. This is where the rubber really meets the road. And so I want to congratulate MIT, Raphael, Anantha, the whole team, Marty, the whole team at MIT for this wonderful time. And with the birth of this new college, I thought it was appropriate for us to give the college a new gift. And so today I'm announcing that we are building in our IBM manufacturing plants 5 racks of Summit that we will deliver to MIT and to the new college as a platform for the college. Thank you very much.
Okay, hi, I'm Regina Barzilai. There was some change in the program, so I'm not Antonia Torralba. And I'm going to talk about how AI changes the way we diagnose and treat diseases. So I would say this is kind of a funny topic. And the reason it is funny, because today when you open a newspaper, you read all the amazing things that AI delivers to you, and there are all the time breakthroughs. But when you go to the hospital, none of us actually see this AI. And this is not surprising. There were a lot of studies that demonstrated only 5% of US healthcare providers are saying that they're using AI to help their patients. And the definition of AI here is pretty fluid. So it's very important for me as a patient to make sure that whatever we are developing in this space is actually deployable in the hospitals and can be used to help patients. So exactly a year ago, I was standing here and talking in a Quest of Intelligence launch, and I was showing a system that we just developed and launched at MGH, which can read mammograms. And I'm happy to tell you that the system was in production for 13 months. It read 40,000 mammograms. And here you can see actually how is it done. This is a traditional room in every hospital where after you've taken your image, there is a person who sits and reads it. So now each one of these images is read by machine, and this is my collaborator, Dr. Connie Lehman, who looks at the prediction of the machine and then signs the report. So the question that I had, and it was great to see that it's working and it's helping and it's doing what humans are supposed to be doing. But the exciting part is, can machines actually do what humans cannot do? And now I will show you an example of something like that. What you can see here are 2 images of women who, at the time when they had a mammogram, didn't have cancer. One of these women developed cancer, another one didn't. Today, none of you and none of the radiologists can say which one of these women will develop cancer in 2 years. But what we know from biology is that cancer doesn't grow from today to tomorrow. It's actually a very long process which makes a lot of changes in tissue. So the logical question is, can you take the machine and train it on the images when we know outcome in 2 years or in 5 years to say what is there to come? And because machine can see hundreds of thousands of images, and because it has capacity to really distinguish between these details, machine was able to do this task pretty well. And this week, we're actually launching at MGH this new risk model. And what we've seen is that if this model places you in top 20%, actually you have a very non-trivial chance to get breast cancer. And now lots of physicians at MGH thinking how we can design procedures which would help these women. And the good news for breast cancer, you can actually do something to prevent. And you can imagine what it will do for other diseases like pancreatic cancer. But diagnosing early is just one of the issues. The second big question is how we are actually curing the disease, correct? And there are lots and lots of diseases for which we don't have a cure now. You can see that investment in pharma continues to grow. The drugs become more and more expensive. And there are a lot of drugs that actually fail even in late stages. So the question is, what can we do? Can we use technology to help us to design drug faster? And this is really a big question, because if you're thinking about it when you are designing the drug, even if you are designing small molecule, which is an easier case, it's a combinatorial space. It's a huge, huge space. And you are looking in this huge space to find the molecule with the right profile. So how we're actually doing it today, there was a lot of advancement in manufacturing, so you can do high throughput screening. You can check lots and lots of molecules and see if they're toxic or not toxic, if they're potent and so on. But obviously you are bounded by how many molecules you can do. Maybe you can do 10,000 or 100,000. You cannot do hundreds of millions of molecules. And that's exactly where our models come in. These models are trained, given the molecular graph, to predict various properties that people care about. And what we've demonstrated that these models actually can do it pretty well across both chemical and biological properties. But what is more interesting is actually to see what these models do. When these models try to interpret molecules, they translate them into some continuous smooth space, okay? And the geography of this space actually relates to how good are the property of this molecule. So it opens us doors to try something really new, which goes into the heart of chemistry. You can start with your molecule, translate it into this very nice continuous space, optimize it in the continuous space, and then generate a new molecule. And that's exactly what we are currently doing. And this work is very recent. It's just half a year old. And our hope is that when we achieve the required capacity, we can totally change the process of drug design. And as I told you, I really care to make sure that what we are doing can actually be deployed and can make a difference. So we have a consortium of 13 pharmaceutical companies that not only help us with funding, but also take our tools, implement them in practice, and give us feedback, and jointly with them, we are working on drug development. So this is very exciting. And let me just finish my talk by showing you some diseases. And I'm sure all of you know the names of these diseases. For none of these diseases, we have cure today. And there will be almost, each one of us knows a person who was diagnosed with one of those diseases. And to me, the real question about AI and healthcare is if in 10 years from now, maybe in 5 years from now, when we are celebrating the birthday of the college, we can actually cross some of these diseases from the list and find the cure. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm sure all of you guys know what wearables are, and probably many of you are wearing them. So I'm going to tell you now about the move from wearables to invisibles. So I work on radio signals. When I started as professor at MIT, I worked a lot on improving Wi-Fi, improving cellular, connecting many, many people on the internet, etc. But about 5 years ago, I started thinking that these radio signals are way more powerful than we are using them today. Just think with me. Radio signals propagate in space. They traverse walls and obstacles. And they reflect of the human body, because our bodies are full of water. And some of these minute reflections will come back to us through walls, through obstacles. And now, if I have a smart device that I can interpret these reflections from wireless signals, maybe I can start seeing through walls. So that was wild when we started, and somehow I convinced my student, let's try. OK, so let me show you some of our early experiments. So this is our early device. and we're going to put it in the office, adjacent to this office, behind the wall, and we're going to monitor this person. And this red dot that you see on the side of the screen is where the device thinks this person is standing right now. So let me play this video for you. So as he moves, you can see the red dot moves with him. And it's all purely based on the reflection from his body through the wall, and we can track him pretty accurately. He has no sensor on his body, no cell phone, nothing. He might be oblivious to being tracked from behind a wall. And it's quite accurate. So this is actually from a few years ago. And over the past few years, I've been working on this with my students here at MIT, improving the technology further. And I want to show you some of our most recent results. In particular, when you look at this, I mean, you see the red dot, and you know he's there at that particular location. But the red dot doesn't tell you, is he standing? Is he sitting? Like, what is he doing there? And when he moves, you see the red dot slides with him, but you don't know whether he took a step with his right foot, his left foot. You didn't know. So let me show you our most recent result from just a few months ago. So now the big frame is what the wireless device sees from behind the wall, and the small frame is the camera inside the room. And as you can see, we are getting the full skeleton of the people from behind the wall. Let me play this. You see when he sits, the device knows that he's sitting, got his full skeleton. It knows how people are moving. There are multiple people who are moving. And remember, all of this using radio signal reflection of the human body from behind the wall without any wearables. Now, how do we do this? Like, how can we make this work? So there are two things. We have advanced radios and machine learning. So I tell people radios is like your ear. For our device, this is the ear of the device. It has to be very, very good and very sensitive to sense these minute reflections from behind the wall. But what is more important is the brain, of course. And that is the machine learning technology. So you hear a lot about machine learning neural networks. They operate on images, on text data, on audio. But what we are doing here is we are making neural networks operate on radio signals to be able to do something, not just get as good as a human, because we all cannot see through walls, but maybe to do something that we cannot do today. OK, so what else can we monitor using these wireless signals without any wearables? Sleep stages. So perhaps you guys know that when we go to sleep, our brain waves change, and we enter different stages: awake, light sleep, deep sleep, rapid eye movement, or REM. Now, in the US, 1 in every 3 people have sleep problems. So being able to understand sleep and improve sleep is very important. But actually, sleep stages are not just important for sleep. They are important for a variety of diseases. Just to give you an example, depression. So do you guys know that one of the signs of depression is that REM, this rapid eye movement stage, happened too early, very early during the night. And that is one of the signs that could happen in depression. So imagine if you can monitor sleep stages every night in the home very easily. Then perhaps we can tell when someone is falling into depression, even without them realizing it. OK, so unfortunately today, if you want to monitor sleep stages, you send your patient to the sleep lab. They put these electrodes on their head. Yeah, it's not really a happy experience. Probably you would do it 1 night, 2 nights maximum, but you don't want to live this way every night. So let me show you what we can do. So this is our device. It transmits very low power wireless signal. It analyzes these reflections using machine learning and spits out the sleep stages throughout the night. It would know when this person is in REM, which is the stage in which we dream. What else can we do? So here's this guy sitting like you guys and reading. we can get his breathing. These signals are nothing but his inhales, exhales. And we ask him to hold his breath, and you can see the signal stays at steady level because he exhaled, he did not inhale. Now, I want to zoom in on these signals further. So this is the same signal, the breathing signal. These are the inhales. These are the exhales. And the first time we saw this signal, it's like, oh, there is some noise on it, these blips. But it turned out, actually, this is not noise. If you zoom in, these are his heartbeats, beat by beat. And again, remember, without any wearables, purely by analyzing the wireless signals in the environment. So what applications this technology has? So of course, there are many applications, but the application that I am interested in is healthcare. So when we started working on this, we got a lot of emails and contacts from doctors saying, can you monitor my patient at home? And you can think about it. Like, for example, doctors discharge patients from hospitals, and when the patient goes home, they have no idea, is he breathing? What is his heartbeat, his vital sign? Is he moving? Is he in bed? What's going on? They don't know. Imagine discharging every patient with a device like this so that you can continue the health monitoring at home. This is also very important for our aging population. We know that for older people, chronic diseases are a very important problem. But we know also that many hospitalizations in chronic diseases are also avoidable if you can detect the problem early on. So this include heart problems, pulmonary problems, things that are related to UTI, kidney problems. There are so many Alzheimer's issues, even depression, all of those things. So today, if you want to monitor patients at home, what do you have? Something like this. So if you want to monitor breathing, you put a nasal probe or chest band on them. For people who have Parkinson, you ask them to wear sensors, the accelerometer on their limbs, and move like that. For sleep, I told you, you have all of these sensors on their head. We are changing this image to this. A smart Wi-Fi-like box that sits in the background of the home and monitor breathing, heartbeat, sleep, falls, gait, mobility, interaction with caregivers, all of that purely by analyzing the surrounding wireless signals without asking the patient to wear a single sensor or to write diaries or to change anything about their usual schedule. We have deployed so far more than 200 devices in homes with patients in different therapeutic areas. We are working with doctors in Parkinson's disease, in Alzheimer's disease, in pulmonary diseases, and in depression. And we are working together with our doctor colleagues, with our pharmaceutical companies, with the healthcare system to try to bring these technologies and these advancements to healthcare. Thank you.